We serve families around the United States, and we really help them make better decisions, hopefully better outcomes in their life having to do with their finances. But it's not just all about the numbers. I mean, it is nice to see your net worth continue to rise. That's certainly a benefit. But it's also about our client's purpose. You know, money has purpose. We work hard during our lifetime. We save. And it's because we want to achieve a purpose in our life or for our loved ones. So aligning your finances with your purpose, your family's purpose, is what gets us excited. So today we're talking about a topic that every one of us, actually, if we're lucky enough, gets to select, and that is Social Security. In somewhat, it sounds like a simple election to make, but what you're going to find out today is there's a lot of variables and a lot of what-ifs. Remember, have you ever used one of those flow charts where it says, if you do this, then go here, but if you say no to that question, then go over here, and then go here, and then move up to the right? That's kind of Social Security. So our goal today is to simplify some of the nuances of Social Security for you. We're also going to talk about certain case circumstances of making different elections and how that may affect you and your family. And we also have a guest speaker today that's going to be talking about a topic very close to Social Security, and that's Medicare. So we're super excited to have her. We'll introduce her after we're done. And I thought this was kind of interesting because, like I said, that flow chart, here's two cats at a table. They're saying, if I apply for early Social Security, I get this. But if I wait till I only have one life, I get this. And that's kind of Social Security. So I call it the choice of a lifetime because, in essence, you have one time to elect what's the best benefit for you and your family. That's a huge responsibility to understand what you're electing and how it's going to affect your finances. So it is a very important choice. And when Tony and I were talking about Social Security, we really thought about the past, where Social Security came from so we can understand the present, how it is today, and also talk about the future. A lot of people are wondering, what about the future of Social Security? So we're going to spend a few minutes on that. So Tony, how about if we start with a little history?
We're going to take you on a little time travel experience. Way back in 1935, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Great Depression, if you remember that. If you remember, in 1935, the Great Depression, there was over 25% unemployment. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, we've got a problem. We want to create something that will keep people from the poverty line. So they created Social Security. OASDI, that's an acronym you'll be learning about. Old Age Survivor and Disability Insurance. There's over 2,700 governing rules that you have to qualify to benefit on your Social Security. And we're going to be talking about FRA, your full retirement age.
And don't worry, we're not going to cover all 2,700 with you today because we'd be here for weeks. But hey, what does Social Security offer today, Tony?
What a great investment Social Security is. Where can you go and get guaranteed income, indexed to inflation, survivor benefits, and preferential tax treatment? Now, preferential tax treatment, there's a caveat to that. You know, remember when, and this is not your grandparents' Social Security or your parents' Social Security. Because remember when they said Social Security is tax-free? Well, it is if you make less than a certain amount of income. So there's tax benefits, but then if you make over a certain threshold, and I don't want to say the number because of the fact that it's always changing.
Well, that's interesting because most people complain your Social Security is taxed, right? So Tony just said 15% of it's tax-free. That sounds a little better, right? But we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So here's some acronyms. We really just put these up here because you're going to see a lot of these acronyms as you start to read about Social Security, and you want to understand what they are. As Tony said, we're going to be talking about two key ones here. That's FRA, full retirement age, and PIA, primary insurance amount. And these are on your slide, so you can take them home and resource all of these acronyms. So I think the very first thing we want to talk about and make sure that after you leave today, you actually have a little bit of homework if you haven't done this already, but to go to the Social Security website and get your Social Security statement.
Now, why should you go to the Social Security website and sign up and get your user ID and sign up for your password? Because of the fact that you better sign up rather than someone else sign up for your Social Security. That's number one. Number two, Social Security will explain to you your earnings package, your benefits package based on your earnings record. And when I went on my Social Security statement, it was pretty exciting for me because it really does show you your career path. When you started out in the 60s and 70s, working as a dishwasher or a waiter at the Niagara Falls Holiday Inn, or at a shoe store, or at a cosmetic counter, at Sattler's as an example. I'm using a few examples, but it gives you a history of your earnings. And for me, it was very interesting.
So what you're saying, Tony, is that you might be open to fraud if you don't go onto the Social Security website and log in and have a password. So that's very important for you to do. But as Tony said, the first page is very important information. It tells you what your full retirement age is. And why is that important? We're going to talk more and more about why full retirement age is important. But it'll give you your benefits, estimated benefits at different ages. And then as Tony said, making sure that your Social Security taxable wages show up correctly, because that's what your Social Security benefit is all about. So if you haven't pulled that statement, I encourage you to do it when you get home tonight. So when and how do you file for Social Security? This question comes up a lot. And Social Security, you want to file up to about 4 months before you want to start receiving the benefits. Now, we can do this today. We don't necessarily have to be in person, but let's talk about how we can do that. How can we file?
Well, excuse me. Number one, you go to SS.
.gov, right? .gov, you got it.
Don't be afraid of it. A cute story I remember in the early 90s, Nancy from North Tonawanda, she was a registered nurse, and she enjoyed going to the mailbox and picking up her Social Security check. And she said to me, "Hey, Tony, do you know that they want me to have my Social Security my bank account?" And then she would tell me, "Do you know how much I enjoyed going to the mailbox, going to the bank, talking to the bank teller?" I said, "Nancy, yes, welcome to technology." So it has changed, but the first thing is, yes, you will be getting a letter from Social Security. Yes, you should be contacting Social Security by phone. And yes, make an appointment. We found that Social Security is driving their appointments via phone. So don't be afraid. They'll schedule a phone meeting with you. Yes, you can go to the Social Security department in your local neighborhood. There's one on Immokalee Road, but you should have an appointment scheduled. So they'll have a history. They're very professional. They'll ask you all the questions, or they'll have all the questions lined up for you, so you'll be able to make an intelligent answer. But at the same time, you want to be prepared. You want to ask the questions so they can develop the profile that best suits you.
And if you know exactly what you're going to elect, you can do it online today. But we like the idea of talking with somebody because, as you can see, there's a lot of variables here. Tony, I still like getting a check in the mail. I wish I could get my Social Security in the mail. So here we go. PIA, primary insurance amount. This is very important because it's how the formula to what kind of benefits you'll be receiving for you and your family. So what is it? It's the highest of your 35 years of wages. That's what goes into the calculation of your Social Security. Now we're going to talk a little bit about full retirement age and what happens if you elect before your full retirement age or after. So I love this because it used to be full retirement age is an age where you can elect your Social Security and still work as much as you want if you'd like to, and they will not withhold any of your Social Security. If you elect before Social Security, your full retirement age, Social Security will be reduced And if you elect after, it could be increased. And we'll talk more about that. But this cartoon, it used to be 65, right? Was full retirement age. What is it today for people in my age bracket? 67. Okay? So you can see this couple just kept looking up and up and up, and it keeps, that age keeps increasing. In fact, in the future, what we might find is that your children can't elect at 62. Today, you could actually elect your Social Security early at 62. But I doubt those generations will have that option. So this is just a little graph for you to take a look at, talking about when you were born, what year, and when would your full retirement age be. Have you guys found your age? You found your full retirement? So why is it important? If you elect before your full retirement age, you will get a reduction in your benefit all the time. It will never change. That reduction, this is a sample of a 67-year-old, my age group. If I took it at 62, I'm going to get a 30% permanent reduction, 1,465. If I wait and actually file the latest possible age that I can, does anybody know that possible age? 70, perfect. If I wait till 70, I'll actually get a 24% increase in my Social Security. 8% a year, past my full retirement age. So that's a huge difference, 1465 to 2634. But it's not that easy. It would be great if all of us just got the highest benefit and maximized it. But there's a lot more variables that go into that decision. So let's talk about working, because I already talked to a few of you in the audience that are working now and collecting Social Security. So what happens is if you're before your full retirement age, for me that would be 67, if I'm working and I elect to take my Social Security at 65, they're going to withhold $1 of Social Security for every $2 of earnings that I have. So my Social Security will be reduced while I'm working. If it's the year of your full retirement age and you're working, let's say my birthday is in December and I'm going to be turning 67, let's say this December, but I'm working this year and I elect to get my Social Security. They will reduce $1 of Social Security for every $3 of earnings. Now there is a threshold. You can earn up to a certain level, about $22,000 approximately, and in your full retirement year, about $54,000. Anything over that, they're going to start withholding your Social Security.
Jill?
Yeah.
What we thought was an interesting statistic was that over 49% of the people who go on Social Security collect before their full retirement age. And out of that 25% start at age 62. What are the reasons? Well, number one, they might be tired of working. Number two, they might have gotten laid off. And number three, they didn't think there'd be subsistence for the Social Security program in years to come. But we're going to be talking about why we think Social Security will survive in the next few years.
So let's talk about Social Security taxes, because a lot of people are surprised that their Social Security benefit is taxed, because it used to be not taxed, right? So this is something that's changed over the years, and you can see that your combined income, whether you're single or joint, you don't have to make a lot in order for your Social Security to be taxed. In fact, for singles, over $34,000, and for joint, over $44,000, you're going to be taxed, your Social Security will be taxed by 85%. So when Tony said you're 15% tax-free, that's true. 85% is taxable, 15% is non-taxable. But it's important to understand this calculation is somewhat complicated, but it includes your adjusted gross income. That's line 11 on your tax return, plus your non-taxable interest, plus 0.5% of your Social Security. And it's a calculation, and if you are over these amounts, your Social Security will be taxed. I can tell you that most of our clients are taxed at 85% because their income's much higher than those thresholds. So now we get into the fun stuff.
Wait a minute, Jill. I thought you said it was non-taxable. And we remember we were going to go on a little time travel. In 1984, Alan Greenspan and fix this because of the fact we've got a hole in our boat, and we're going to be sinking on the subsistence of Social Security, on the solvency of Social Security. So we're going to start charging, if you make over X, we're going to start charging your Social Security up to 50%. Oh my goodness. And then in 1996, Alan Greenspan had a cup of coffee with Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, and they said the boat is still leaking. So that's when they upped it to 85% of your Social Security would become taxable if you made 2X. I thought that was an
interesting history. Yeah. So now this is where Social Security gets really fun. What are the filing rules based on if you're married, a surviving spouse, a divorcee? There's lots of different rules and regulations. Tony and I are going to talk about a few today. And we're going to talk about the biggest scenarios, the most scenarios we see in our planning practice, and that's the surviving spouses, the joint households, and the divorce spouses. So let's start getting into all of this fun stuff. So first, let's talk about married spouses. So there's some very interesting filing rules here because you might have a married couple where one spouse pretty much stayed home in the household and doesn't have any working credits. It's possible, taking care of the family, etc. If they're married, they are eligible for a spousal benefit. So if their spouse did have credit, and when they elect their Social Security, they have to actually elect it and start receiving it. The spouse that doesn't have credits can receive up to 50%. A lot of people don't know that, so that's kind of interesting. What's the eligibility? Age 62. You have to be married at least for 1 year in order to get that. And remember, your spouse has to file for their Social Security for the other spouse to start receiving spousal benefits. Anything you want to add there, T?
In 2016, I don't know if you remembered this, but in 2016, they had a rule called file and suspend. Well, they said, no, we cannot allow that anymore because you're really outwitting the system. So they closed that ruling on file and suspend. So now, if the spouse is going to start to collect, the higher earner has to also file.
Now let's talk about joint households, married couples, both have credits, both have eligibility for Social Security. Now it gets more complicated because we're dealing with two benefits now. So what are the options? Well, the husband can delay, the wife can delay, both can delay. And what I mean by delay, I mean take it after full retirement age, or neither of them can delay. Okay? So how do you figure all that out? Well, this graph kind of talks a little bit about what situations are usually the most beneficial. And what we see here is that delaying one spouse benefit can help the other spouse. So that's this dark blue area here. So that's one person delays past full retirement age. The other spouse collects as soon as possible. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's beneficial. When does it make sense for both couples to delay, to wait until age 68, 69, 70 to take their Social Security? See this little green box? There's only a few circumstances where that makes sense. And when does it make sense? That makes sense if both of you feel that you have a great health background, good genetics, you're going to live a long time, and you're going to live past the break-even point. What's the break-even point? It's somewhere around the mid-80s, where by waiting to collect it, you get a larger check, and if you live past that break-even point, you're actually benefits, that's the best effective benefits that you could receive for your lifetime. When only one person should delay, so when that happens, couples should try and have the higher earner delay, and it works best with a normal life expectancy, or if one of the spouses have longevity. It's always the higher earner, the spouse that has the highest Social Security that wants to delay, no matter what their health care reason is, or their health, and we'll talk about why that is. And then there's a space here where it makes sense where neither of them should delay. And usually that makes sense if you have a shorter lifespan. If you don't think you're going to make it to that break-even point, then it makes sense to collect Social Security as soon as possible. Let's talk about surviving spouses. You want to start us out on that, T?
There's so many scenarios that we can have here, and what Jill and I thought it would be best to break it down. And there's a questionnaire that we have that will separate and kind of like build a picture for you. But from, you have to be married for at least 9 months. Benefits can be taken as early as age 60. That's if the spouse, not the spouse, but the higher earner passes away. You can then file on the higher earner, I should say, benefit package. Currently, this is interesting, Jill. I thought I'm 58 years old. My spouse passes away. I have to wait till age 60 to start collecting Social Security on my spouse's benefit package. But what happens if I get married again? Do I lose that benefit package?
You don't. So a couple interesting things here. One, if you are a surviving spouse, you're eligible up to 100% of your spouse that's deceased. The year they pass, whatever they were collecting, you actually collect on their full retirement age benefit. So that's important to know. And then let me run through a scenario. We have two 60-year-olds, both eligible for Social Security. One passes away. That surviving spouse actually has a couple options. This is one of the only scenarios where they do. Remember, that surviving spouse had her own Social Security benefit, and she also has a spousal benefit from her spouse that passed. She could actually start taking her spousal benefit and defer her benefit till age 70 and let it grow. And then at 70, she can switch. Kind of interesting. So those are some of the nuances.
And that's in a perfect world. Having that happen.
The what ifs, and then you go there, and then you take a turn. Well, let's talk about divorced spouses, because obviously we see this as well. What happens and what eligibility do they have? So this is a key number, 10. 10. Must be married for 10 years in order to get a benefit off of an ex-spouse. The benefit is 50%, not 100%, but 50% of your ex-spouse's Social Security. So that's important to understand. You have to be currently unmarried to collect it. So if you get remarried, you are not eligible for your ex-spouse's, a portion of your ex-spouse's Social Security. So if I'm divorced and I've been married for 10 years and I'm thinking about collecting Social Security, what I'm going to make sure I tell Social Security or your advisor is that, yes, I've been divorced and I could possibly look at my ex-spouse's Social Security and see if it's higher than mine and elect that instead. Now, the interesting thing, or the nice thing that Social Security did, is your ex-spouse's Social Security will not change at all. They don't even know that you're electing off of them. All you need is their Social Security and date of birth. So if you get divorced, make sure you keep your ex-spouse's Social Security and date of birth, because it could be important to you. So those are all important things to remember. Now, let's say I'm divorced. I'm thinking about Social Security. I'm going to check my ex-spouses. I'm going to check mine. I'm going to see which one's bigger. I have to be unmarried in order to collect his. Now, my ex-spouse passes. So they're not alive. Can I collect benefits off of him? What's your guess? Yes, yeah. You can collect benefits even if you remarry after 60, if your ex-spouse passes. So you can see how important it is to know your history when you're talking about what election you're going to make, because it could have an impact on which benefit you elect. And then understand that if you're a surviving spouse, you really have some very interesting options. Now, sometimes Social Security isn't going to call your household and say, Mary, didn't you know you can defer yours till 70 and collect your spousal benefit? Not necessarily. You might be notified, you might not. So these are important things to understand on your own. Anything you want to add to that, T?
And that's the power of working with an advisor. Yes, we'd love to have you as a client, but the power of the advisor can bring knowledge to the table, objectivity, and asking the questions that you might not have ever thought of.
Let's just talk about the future of Social Security. You want to talk about that a little bit?
The future of Social Security, what's going to save America? Tax legislation. That's what's going to save America, in the sense that you have to be knowledgeable on taxes. And so the future of Social Security, I feel, and most people feel, it will continue, but at the same time, you have to be knowledgeable of the questions to ask.
Now, why will it continue? Because Social Security is funded by what? Tax on workers. So if we have workers in the United States, which would be pretty hard to imagine we wouldn't have any, the Social Security is going to be funded. So their tax on work goes into the Social Security fund to provide those benefits. Now in 2034, I think is the year, they said, well, at that point in time, we're going to have more retirees than we've ever had. So there's going to be more people draining the system. So what's going to happen at that point? Well, some of the things that they've talked about is a decrease in Social Security benefits, up to 23%. They've also talked about increasing your full retirement age, taking it at later times in your life. So there could be adjustments on Social Security, but highly doubtful that we're going to see that system where it doesn't pay out anything.
Yeah. One more acronym to understand. FICA, remember the term FICA? Federal Insurance Contribution Act. It's not a tax, it's an act. But if you look in your payroll stuff, it's a tax. But that is going to be a very increase. Your tax on FICA will consistently increase. They'll have a cap, but remember the term FICA.
Yeah, that's a good point, T. That's something that they really are doing now, where if you are working, you're paying more and more into the Social Security system. So for sure. So let's talk about some other intangibles, and there's a lot that we really didn't get into today, and this is why it's not only a numbers calculation, but it's also learning about you and your family. We talked about health, so knowing your health background and understanding what that's like. Of course, we're only guessing, but we do have some things to consider there, as well as genetics. How long did mom and dad live, brothers and sisters? Also, a real important part of Social Security is it is a small piece, but an important piece of your retirement. So how does it correlate with the other assets that you have? How do you need it? As an example, some people might want to collect early, but they don't even need it. They've got plenty of assets to create cash flow, so maybe we can delay it a little bit. So one of the things we do as advisors at Ciccarelli Advisory is make sure you have an asset and liability net worth. What are your assets? What kind of possible cash flow can be produced? How are they taxable? And how will Social Security integrate into that? And of course, also what does play a part of it is what are the markets doing? Where is inflation? When inflation is high, getting a Social Security benefit is pretty good. How come? Do you guys remember when we had, I think it was 2 years ago, an 8% increase if you were collecting Social Security? Because that was the inflation rate. So there's all kinds of determinants that go into that. One of the things that we have at Ciccarelli Advisory Services is a 360 comparison strategy. So we get all that information together from our clients. We plug it into a technology system that's probably smarter than us in calculating all the different scenarios you possibly could have with Social Security. And it comes up with a report that shows us what happens if you elect early, at full retirement age, what is your optimal election age, and what are some other alternatives. So it's a really interesting conversation to have with our clients about electing their Social Security.
One other comment though, Jill. Jill said that the most important question or decision you have to make is, when do I take my Social Security? There's another question you have to ask yourself. How do I withdraw and take my income from all my employer-sponsored 401k plans. That also incorporates into the calculation. So that's another decision that you've been working, saving money in your 401k, your qualified plans. How do I incorporate that with when collecting Social Security?
So you can see it's not a real easy decision, and it does take time to learn about strategies, to sit with an advisor, because this is not easy. And remember, in the beginning I said you have one chance to make an election, and then that's what you have for the rest of your life. Now there is a little caveat to that if you go to a session like this and you say, I already elected my Social Security, I don't think it's the right thing, I didn't elect right. You have up to 12 months to reverse that election. Of course, you got to pay everything back, and you can elect another strategy. So just want to let you know that. Now, what is hand in hand with Social Security? Medicare. And if I think Social Security is complicated, holy smokes. The problem with Medicare and supplements is that it's changing all of the time. So we do not specialize in that side of the planning, but we have great resources that we can bring to the table for you. And today we brought in one of our guest speakers, one of those resources, Maura Carley, and she is from Healthcare Navigations. What I love about Maura is that she's been in the business for over 35 years. We're still very young, both her and I, but we've been in the business a long time. And what that allows really for us is to bring wisdom to the table. It's not just knowledge and what the current elections are, but it's wisdom. What's happened in the past? How could that affect us in the future? So I'm very happy to introduce Maura Carley, and after she's done talking, we'll open up for some questions.
Thanks for having me today. My badge will not stay on because I'm here from the Northeast, and this fabric is too thick apparently. But there are a number of parallels between the earlier presentation and mine, because Medicare is a government program that just keeps getting, for the most part, more complicated. Sometimes things get simpler, but that's pretty rare. So I have limited time today, so I thought I'd focus on two major issues that we see people having buyer's remorse over. And that is enrolling in A and B properly, because if you don't, your Part B, once you get on it, you can pay lifetime premium penalties. So you don't want to do that. I'm sure the government did that so that when this all started in 1966, people signed up. You always want to get people in the risk pool and not have people say, well, you know, that's a nice program, but I think I'll wait until I'm old and sick. So the penalties are very severe. And the other issue I wanted to address is the very important decision of, do I stay in original Medicare or do I choose an Advantage plan, which is actually opting out of original Medicare and choosing Aetna or United or any other carrier. So the first problem we face is people hear the term Medicare and think it's a single program. But it's really Medicare A, Part B, Part C, although Advantage plans are technically Part C. No one ever hears about Part C. And Medicare's drug benefit, which came around last. That started in 2006, Part B. To give you an example, people like my parents, they were living in an era where your full retirement age was the same birthday as first being eligible for Medicare. So it was really easy for them. They wanted Social Security at 65. If you apply for Social Security before you're 65, you just get sent your Medicare card. A and B, you're enrolled. You did nothing except apply for Social Security. And they were both state of California retirees, so they had their retiree medical, and I don't think they ever had to do anything again. So what's happened now is you have, Advantage plans, and there's so many choices, usually 25 or so in a given geographic area. And same with drug plans. Supplements, too, are complicated. You know, it was originally A through J, and I don't know who labeled them letters, and they're probably long gone at this point, but I don't think it was so wise to label them as letters when Medicare was already letters. You know, it's very complicated. So the things that have changed, a few years ago, Medicare numbers changed. So now if you are enrolling in Medicare, sometimes you're enrolling in A and B at the same time, but more and more people are working later, and they may enroll in A first just to get their Medicare number, because it's a randomly generated number. So many of you know now that changed in 2018 and 19, not your social anymore. But as was noted in the other presentation, your initial enrollment period is around your 65th birthday. So if that's when you go on Medicare, that's when you apply for A and B and make these other decisions. It's the special enrollment period that's more dicey. That's for people who work beyond age 65, and there's more and more of those. And since Medicare Part B and now D, they're both income indexed, so if you're eligible for active group coverage, most people don't want to go on to Medicare, so they defer their Part B enrollment. And the tricky thing is, you're in a special enrollment period the entire time you have that active work through your job or a spouse's job. For employers, 20 or more, different rules by state if it's a smaller group. But the end of your special enrollment period starts, it's an 8-month clock whenever your active work stopped or your coverage ended, whichever came first. And what we're having problems with is employers giving subsidized COBRA, and what they're doing doesn't really mesh with Medicare rules. So people in that category have to be particularly careful. The general enrollment period is for those people who didn't get on Part B during their initial enrollment period or their special enrollment period. It's like the default method. We're in that now. It's the first quarter of every year. And so you don't want to miss that because you're likely to pay a penalty for life if that's, it depends on how close you are to your 66th birthday, but you have to wait until the following year if you have to get on Part B that way. So it's more challenging than people expect. And these are the constellations. Most people have, you know, A and B, drug coverage through Part D, and a private Medicare supplement. Those are private products to help you with coinsurance and other co-payments. Advantage plans are an alternative to original Medicare. When you elect one of those, you're telling the government to give that other insurance company roughly what the government thinks they're going to spend on the average Medicare beneficiary. You know, there's just pros and cons. But I wish more people would consider these issues carefully rather than be, you know, in a situation where they're taking Joe Namath's advice. I think that's deeply unwise. So original Medicare provides the greatest freedom of choice with the least hassle. You don't have to worry about a network. It was interesting, this fall we had the biggest year we've ever had for people wanting to get out of Advantage plans and back onto original Medicare for different reasons. You know, there are other enrollment periods where you can go back and forth. The key issue is you can't always get a supplement when you return to original Medicare. Remember, they're private products, they're regulated by the feds and the states. In a state like Florida, you have a guaranteed issue period. which matches the federal law for 6 months from your Part B effective date. And after that, whether or not you can get one is based on your health status. The insurer can send you an application full of medical questions, and if they don't like your answers, they don't have to enroll you. But interestingly, this year we had a couple of people contact us in the fall who were Yale University retirees. And Yale once had their retiree medical structured to work with original Medicare, and then they moved everybody into an Aetna PPO. Now, that's an Advantage plan. PPO usually suggests I have freedom, I can go to any provider, but at specialty hospitals, for example, Sloan Kettering used to have very limited participation with Advantage plans. As Advantage plan enrollment has grown, they've evolved. But interestingly, both of these Yale University people who'd been seen in one way or another at the Mayo Clinic in the past tried to be seen there, and they just, we don't take that plan, I'm sorry. So you really have to think of am I the kind of person, if I'm diagnosed with something, I want to go wherever I want to go, or am I really happy? You know, my mother was a Kaiser Permanente member in California for decades, and she stayed with that at 65. She was very content. It was her doctor's, different kind of Advantage plan, rather than contracting with fee-for-service people in a certain geography. But you really have to weigh the pros and cons. Advantage plans often have a zero premium or very modest premium. And so in terms of expense, what you're comparing is that premium versus what you might pay for a supplement. And there are many different choices of supplements, and there are different choices of Advantage plans, but that's the difference in cost. So people should understand that. Some people are very attracted by the zero premium plan, but this year, Advantage plans can have an out-of-pocket max as high as $8,550, and that's a lot of money. I think the average is, what, Eileen, $4,000? Okay, $4,000. But if you picked a zero premium plan and then have $4,000 of out-of-pocket exposure, you may have buyer's remorse. So you really want to be careful. In summary, and I have a colleague here, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. So, we made this intentionally brief, but we'll be here to answer any questions you might have. I know this is very general. What I talked about in terms of medical underwriting supplements doesn't apply in certain states. It certainly does in most states. But some states don't allow medical underwriting, and they all have different rules. That's why this is such a headache. A newer development is a handful of states are allowing some changes. You usually already have to have a supplement. So I feel compelled to mention that, but the fact is it's most important to choose wisely when you first go on Medicare, when you have your right to any choice. And that's it. I thank you. Oh, stay up, stay.
Thank you, Maura. Wow, you can see how this is so individual, right? And it has a lot to do with your health, right, Maura, in the sense of what's elected?
It does, but you have to weigh in on the reality that what your health is today may not be the same as 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Yes, and it probably has a lot to do with your assets, what you're willing to pay out of pocket, versus lower premiums as well. So you can see how all of this integrates. For those of you that might be viewing this online, please feel free to go to our website and learn more about our services, casmoneymatters.com. And also, if you have questions and you're not in the room, you can always email us. So in the presentation slides, our email is on the last slide. I'm going to pull it up in a minute. And you can send your questions to our email. So with that, let's open up for questions. Yes. Sir. Yeah.
You were mentioning about the supplements and states, and you kept using the word state. What happens when you live in one state and you relocate to another state?
Okay, so that's a great question. Let me just repeat that, or if you'd like to repeat the question more and then answer it.
You're asking about buying different supplements in different states?
If you move, I live in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
Medicare, I'm going to buy something. 4 years from now, I'm going to move to another state.
Okay. You know what? Let me just go back one step. The federal government regulates the benefits that are in a supplement. 47 states use the same not so great system, actually. Too many choices. I like Massachusetts, a core and an enhanced. 2 choices is enough, but most are choosing, it's A through N minus blah, blah, blah. What the states regulate are other parameters, how the premium is developed, whether they charge more for somebody who admits they smoke, all kinds of things. But the fact is, if you buy, say, a Plan G supplement, whether you're in New York, Florida, California, Texas, same benefits. What you have to be careful about is shopping among the insurance companies. You want to always buy one that's portable. Then you can move anywhere. So United Healthcare products are always portable, Blue Cross Blue Shield, but they're not all portable. So that's a very, very important consideration, because if you buy a product that you take with you, when you move, you just call your insurance company and you say, here's my new address, what's my new premium? Whereas if you buy something that's not portable, you're going to run up against the 6-month rule and face medical underwriting. But when you're on a supplement, you can use that anywhere. It just goes along with your original Medicare anywhere in the country.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Maura. Any other questions? Yes, Rick.
Question on Medicare. So, when you're earning income still from work, and I understand there's a penalty that you have to pay more on Medicare if you're on Medicare. Does that go away once you stop earning W-2 or 1099 income? Or does it keep with you if you are taking your income out of your portfolio from a 401k or an IRA?
Yeah, the government needs money. They wouldn't call it a penalty. They call it the privilege of higher income Americans supporting the program more. And it's always based on your income, even. It's not just earned income. So it's your distributions and all of that. And the government's looking back 2 years. So in 2024, you're going to pay an income indexed amount. This year's at $203,000 for a couple. It just changed again. But around there, half that for an individual. And so as your income gets lower over time as you age, it's called IRMA, income-related Medicare adjustment amount, should go down. But there's no escape from it. As long as you're making so much money, that's how it is. And only 5% of Americans pay it, according to the government. But you've got to plan ahead, because in some of those brackets, the brackets can increase, or what you're paying increases, and it's higher than your Social Security adjustment. So it can be a lot of money. You can pay almost $600 a month for your Part B at the highest level now.
So is there any way to get out of that or not?
Well, there's a form called an SSA 44, which if you have a life-changing event, like death of a spouse or your retirement, let's say you retire and your income plummets, and so your projected income is lower than 2 years prior. Then you can use that form for 2 years if you're in that situation where your current year income is likely to be less than 2 years prior. But that's the only time you have to have one of those life-changing events to use that form.
Maura, on that, what's the low and the high of those premiums, like 174 to 3?
I think it's 174.90, 174.90 this year, to 590 and change, 590.50, I think. It's hard to keep all these numbers straight at the beginning of the year. I'll know them later.
Thanks, Maura. Any other questions? Yes, Kathy?
Your income changes, goes down. How long after that period is there an adjustment of what you're paying?
Yeah, so that's a great question. How long after the period you stop working and your income goes down? So it's 2 years. They're looking back at 2 years at your tax return.
And do you have to do anything to make that happen?
Not if you're letting them go back the 2 years, but if you want to use SSA Form 44, you should move quickly. I have an older brother who had a stroke in 2020, and he was making, good money prior to his stroke, and he will only have his Social Security and book royalties and some other, investments. I used the form myself. For him. It wasn't that challenging. But you want to get it right, because if you're wrong, the government expects it to come out right. So if you lowball it, they'll likely ask you for more money.
Yeah, I think it's just important to mention that, like Joe said, and Tony, we're not the experts in Medicare by any means. Thank you so much, Maura. But what is important to talk to your advisor about is when you are entering into the tax year, a substantial increase in 1 year due to the sale of assets, whatever your home, you really want to plan for any other lump income that you may take in. Like you could plan to collect that all in 1 year and only have a one-time adjustment for Medicare, whereas sometimes if you try to spread it out and if you adjust it continually, your premiums could go, as you mentioned, could go from 190 to 250 or to 590. So it is very important to share that with your advisor. You have to plan out how to get your income. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I just like to second that, because many of the calls we get are from people who don't even realize Medicare's income index. They've never paid it, then they plan to move to a cheaper part of the country, and they have a big capital gain from the sale of their residence, and they owe income index premiums. And that's exactly how it's supposed to work. They'll pay elevated premiums for that associated with that tax year.
And it's applied to both spouses, so it could be a
Right.
substantial difference.
Yeah, and most people are always surprised about that. Yeah.
Is that why it would be better potentially to have more after-tax income in your portfolio and to have that strategy talk with?
It's definitely makes sense to have a strategy talk, because we're not only talking about selling assets and having capital gains, but can we defer income and can we spread it out? And that has to do with the different types of assets you have in your portfolio and what kind of income they're creating. Yeah, thank you, Rick. Paul?
So let's say someone's still working, turns age 65, applies for Medicare. Can we go through that period again where you can avoid the penalty by doing the Part B election when?
The federal law is that you have a special enrollment as long as you have active group coverage through your work or a spouse for a group of 20 or more employees.
If you're under that, you're not allowed?
No, it's just that most of the time you're required to enroll in A and B. You could keep the group, but the federal law basically says you can't discriminate if it's a group at least of 20 people against the older worker. That's the thinking, that, okay, that's a big enough business that makes sense. But I think Connecticut is the only state that has state legislation that mirrors the federal for small groups. And then in some states, it's up to the plan. But in most states, you are forced to go on A and B if it's small group. And at that point, the group can be secondary, but it's usually not worth it. You know, at that point, usually the person just chooses to go on Medicare. But the special enrollment is 8 months. I don't even like talking about the 8 months because everybody thinks they can go on COBRA, and that's not a good solution unless it's subsidized. So most people want their active group coverage to end one day, end of the month, and all their Medicare parts to be in place the first of, the next day, which is the first of a month. What complicates this is the people taking COBRA on their own. That's usually an affliction of affluent men who say, it doesn't make financial sense to anybody else, but an affluent man will say, look at Medicare, look at all those parts. Oh my gosh, I can't deal with this. Just give me the COBRA. I don't care what it costs. And then they stay on COBRA too long and miss that special enrollment period. And they pay premium penalties the rest of their life. But when we get clients who are legitimately having subsidized COBRA, then we have the staggered thing. Okay, well in 8 months you need to go on B, and then, well, we can use this subsidized group COBRA for your secondary until, so it gets much more complicated. But that only applies to a minority of people, although it's growing. I say your group coverage ends, you go on Medicare the next day.
Thanks, Maura. Tony, you were mentioning you had a question earlier today from a client, right?
Yes, I've got a scenario where client is age 65, prior to FRA, prior to full retirement age. But he said, hey, Tony, he called me Anthony, he says, I'm going to retire in June. I've already made $50,000 in earnings. Will my Social Security be tapped, or will I be penalized on my earnings going forward because I've already made that $50,000? So it's a common scenario because I'm retiring prior to FRA. So we contacted Social Security, and it's a calculation, but he would get a discount on his Social Security because he's retired before FRA, and a little bit of a discount because he's already earned that amount that he was not able to earn and not be affected with the Social Security. So there's all these scenarios. But I also want to say, number one, thank you, Dave Elliott. We want to thank 98.9 for taking care of our video and audio. We want to thank young Eileen. This is really a family affair because we've got Maura's daughter here as her assistant. And I think Jill wants to mention.
Well, I think one thing I wanted to talk about with taking some of the Social Security out if you're working, most people think you lose it, but you really don't. What happens is they are going to credit you back the money they withhold while you're working. It'll start at your full retirement age or when you elect Social Security, and they'll pay it out over a period of time through your 80s. So you might not get it all back, but it does come back to your benefits. So that was a great question. Yeah, Maura.
What happens if you apply for A and B, right, you're 65, and then you go back to work full-time at a company that has more than 20 employees and they offer health care coverage?
That's really a good question because people are working past 65, right? So, Maura?
That comes up more and more. And we helped somebody who was a long-term employee. We just finished, he's going on February 1 after a year of Bank of New York Mellon keeping him on in this staggered way. But anyway, then he says, I have 3 job offers. So we'll probably be undoing all of that good work we did for him because it's more attractive to take the active group and avoid the Medicare income index premiums. You never go off A. You're on A forever, but an A, people call it free. It's not free. You paid for it your entire working life, so it's premium free. But you don't get off that, but you can get off B. There's a form you use that goes into Social Security.
Thanks, great question. One more question. Yeah.
Can you get on B at different times? Like if you didn't need prescriptions, and now all of a sudden you need a lot of prescriptions, can you get on and you've been on A and B for a few years?
You know what, I didn't really talk about that. There's so many enrollment periods. Your Part D applies to any one of these enrollment periods, but normally you want it when you're going on A and B, right? But the annual enrollment period is the fall, the 15th of October through December 7th, if you wanted to get on a D plan or change plans. The enrollment period we're in now is if you were leaving an Advantage plan and going back to original Medicare, you could, yes, get a D. And if your group coverage is ending, you also, you know, the rules for D aren't as punitive as for B. So D rules actually recognize COBRA as creditable coverage. Horrible word, creditable. But so D is not as punitive, but just don't want a gap in drug coverage because that's such a risk in this country. But yes, you're not, if you stay on your group, you have a special enrollment when you retire to get on D.
You can see why you need a team, right? So could I just have, since we're in a small room, the Ciccarelli advisors come up. Eileen, come on up here, because we're going to have a few minutes afterwards to join us for something to drink, a little bit of something to eat, and we're going to all be here. So we can spend some time with you with any questions. Come on, don't be shy. Just come on up so they can see everybody. So Eileen, who we've mentioned earlier, so you know who she is. Kim Cantor, President of Ciccarelli Advisory Services. Lynn Farina, Partner and Advisor. Kay Anderson, Advisor and Partner. Josh, thank you Josh for joining us. Steve Merkel, Partner and Advisor. And Paul Ciccarelli, Partner Advisor.